Hey, welcome back. It's good to have you here. I was thinking the other day about the coldest I've ever been. It was during my first winter in New York, waiting for a delayed train on an elevated platform in Queens, the wind coming off the East River like a physical thing. I remember that deep, bone-aching cold, the kind that makes you feel brittle. And then I thought, that was nothing. Nothing at all. Because I was wearing a proper coat. I could go home. For the men we're going to talk about today, cold wasn't a weather condition. It was the enemy. An enemy more relentless, more unforgiving than the one they were actually fighting. I'm Ibnul J. Farabi, and this is Flashpoints, the wars that shaped us. Today, we're going to the mountains of North Korea, November 1950. The Korean War was a few months old. UN forces, led by the United States, had just pulled off a stunning victory at Inchon, pushing the invading North Korean army all the way back to the Chinese border. The war seemed all but won. General Douglas MacArthur promised the troops would be home by Christmas. Morale was high. And then, everything changed. This is the story of the Chosin Reservoir, a frozen body of water that became the stage for one of the most brutal, heroic, and consequential retreats in military history. The Americans called it a retreat. The Marines who fought there call it an attack in a different direction. So picture this. The 1st Marine Division, along with some U.S. Army units, are strung out along a single, treacherous mountain road. They're in a narrow valley, surrounded by the steep, snow-covered peaks of the Taibik Mountains. The temperature is plunging. We're talking 30, 40 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit. The wind whips down from Siberia. Their equipment is freezing. Their rations are frozen solid. Their medical supplies, their morphine syringes, have to be carried in their mouths to keep them liquid. They are isolated, overextended, and utterly unaware that they have walked into a trap. Because waiting for them in those mountains, hidden in the snow and the pine forests, were over 120,000 soldiers of the Chinese People's Volunteer Army. They had crossed the Yalu River in secret, moving only at night, under strict silence. They wore thin cotton uniforms and canvas sneakers. They had no air support, no tanks to speak of, no sophisticated logistics. What they had was numbers, surprise, and a terrifying willingness to sacrifice. Their tactic was the human wave, overwhelming firepower with bodies. And on the night of November 27, 1950, they struck. They came out of the darkness, blowing bugles and whistles, a sound that would haunt the survivors for the rest of their lives. The entire valley erupted. Isolated outposts were overrun. The Marines and soldiers were suddenly surrounded, cut off from each other, fighting for their lives in the pitch black and the paralyzing cold. This is where the story shifts from a military disaster to something else entirely. The commander of the 1st Marine Division, Major General Oliver P. Smith, famously refused to panic. When told to retreat, he said, "Retreat? Hell, we're not retreating. We're just advancing in a different direction." That wasn't just bravado. It was a mindset. They weren't going to run. They were going to fight their way out. They had to. The only path to salvation was that one mountain road, now blocked by multiple Chinese divisions. They would have to attack south, down the road, breaking through Chinese roadblocks, while also defending their perimeters from constant assault. They called it the breakout. What followed was a 78-mile fighting retreat that became a legend. It was a battle against two armies, the Chinese and the cold. Frostbite was rampant. Men's feet froze in their boots. Weapons jammed. Batteries died. To get a wounded man onto an evacuation truck could mean certain frostbite. And yet, the cohesion, the discipline of the Marines held. They formed into a column. They would take a hill dominating the road, fight off counterattacks, then move the entire column, trucks, wounded, artillery, a few miles down the road, then do it all over again. At a critical pass called Funchalen, the Chinese blew up a bridge, a gap that seemed to doom the entire column. The U.S. Air Force responded by dropping portable bridge sections by parachute. Engineers, under fire, in that brutal cold, assembled the bridge, and the column rolled on. The personal stories from Chosin are almost beyond belief. There's the story of Lieutenant John Yancey, who led a bayonet charge up a hill when his men ran out of ammunition. There are the pilots flying in from aircraft carriers, risking everything to drop supplies and provide close air support, often in whiteout conditions. And then there are the Chinese soldiers, many of whom fought with just a few rounds of ammunition, expecting to get more from the dead. It was a clash not just of nations, but of philosophies of war. One side had all the material advantage in the world. The other had sheer mass and will. And in the middle, the cold was the great equalizer. When the shattered column finally fought its way to the port of Hungnam, they weren't just a broken force. They were a coherent, disciplined unit that brought out their wounded, their dead, and most of their equipment. They had inflicted catastrophic casualties on the Chinese forces, which also suffered terribly from the cold. But strategically, it was a crushing defeat. The dream of a unified, non-communist Korea was over. The war would stalemate for 2 more bloody years along the 38th parallel. The world learned that China was now a major military power, willing to intervene directly. And the United States learned a painful lesson in the limits of its power and the perils of underestimating an enemy. I think about Chosin a lot, not just as a battle, but as a metaphor. I'm an engineer by training, an entrepreneur now. I understand systems, logistics, planning. And what Chosin teaches me is that no plan survives first contact with reality. The arrogance of MacArthur's push to the Yalu was a failure of imagination. He couldn't imagine an enemy willing to endure what the Chinese endured. But on the other side, the American response, that stubborn, disciplined, advancing in a different direction, that was a triumph of adaptability. It was about making a new plan, minute by minute, in the face of impossible odds. It was about the human spirit refusing to be broken by circumstance. That's a lesson that goes far beyond war. It applies to starting a business here in New York, to navigating life as an immigrant, to facing any seemingly insurmountable challenge. You assess, you adapt, and you keep moving forward, one frozen step at a time. The men who survived Chosin called themselves the Chosen Few. They endured a hell that most of us can scarcely comprehend. They faced a trap of epic proportions and fought their way out with a courage that defies the cold facts of history. They didn't win the battle, but they saved an army. And in doing so, they created a story of resilience that would shape the U.S. Marine Corps' identity forever. In the end, the frozen Chosin wasn't just a retreat from a trap. It was a masterclass in how to survive one. Thanks for listening to this episode of Flashpoints. If this story resonated with you, I'd be so grateful if you'd share the show with a friend or leave a rating and review. It really helps others find us. This show is produced by Light Knot Studios. You can find more of our narrative documentaries and learn about our team at lightknotstudios.com. I'm Ibnul J. Farabi. Until next time, take care.